You're watching Oilers Nation every day with Tyler Yaremchuk. Your one-stop shop for all things Oilers.
The Oilers pick up a win in Denver. I believe they call that joining the Mile High Club. Let's get into it with the lead. What? Aaron, my producer's in my ear saying that's not what it means. That's on me. That's on me. Welcome into Oilers Nation every day, a presentation of Bet365. Download the app today. Use the promo code NATION to get in on a huge range of markets. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Welcome into the show live from the Sports Closet studio, which looks maybe a little different right now. And that's because I'm still in a hotel in beautiful Denver, Colorado, as our guy Rusty says. Interesting backdrop, Tyler. Yeah, I mean, it's maybe not as pretty as what we're used to in the Sports Closet studio, but we make it work. I'm just hoping the internet holds up. We got a good show lined up for you. Louie DeBrusk is going to swing by in about 20 minutes time for his usual Monday appearance. Anthony DeMarco is going to take us around the league at 12:40. And of course, Liam is here. Where's Liam? I can't find him. There he is, all the way back home in Edmonton. How's it going, Liam? How are you dealing with the snow?
I just haven't left my house since, honestly, Friday night. I've just been snuggled right in, avoiding everything I can.
That's a good way. That's good living. Honestly, that is good living. Since we've last spoken, the Oilers have won 2 hockey games. They have won 7 of their last 10 points in 8 of those 10 games. As points percentage wise, they're starting to work their way up in the Western Conference. But it is interesting to see kind of how 1 week can change your perception of a team. Like, it feels like last Saturday, again, they were going into that matchup against the New York Rangers, and we were kind of, we're down in the dumps a little bit coming off the 5-3 loss to Minnesota. They had lost 3 of their last 4 with the OT loss to Toronto and then the 3-0 game in Montreal. But they beat the New York Rangers 6-2. They go into Utah, win that game 4-3, and then they go and win what was honestly kind of like a no-doubter to me against Colorado. I know the Avs scored first in that game, but there was really never a point in that hockey game where I was worried about what the outcome of that game was going to be. Like, I give the Oilers full marks. I thought against the Rangers, they were very, very good and took advantage of a vulnerable opponent in New York. Against Utah, it didn't start well coming off their weird bye week, but I almost give them more credit because of the way they snapped out of things after a lackluster first period. Then against Colorado, they were just like, hey, we're a way better team than you guys, and they showed it.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's just a roller coaster of being an Edmonton Oilers fan, right? I'm watching this team every night. They just kind of all over the place for a week, and then the next week they just come back and prove like, oh yeah, they are actually one of the most skilled teams in the NHL. And this weekend, I think it was really good contributions from basically the entire lineup. And one thing I found interesting, because they probably weren't that good in the first period of the Utah game, worthy, and in the post game, I believe it was Nugent, Draisaitl both addressed it. Like, we came in this room and there wasn't finger pointing of like, you need to do this, you need to do that. It was like, as a collective team, like, they all knew they weren't good in that first period against Utah, and they came through and had 5 really good periods, I think you could say.
Yeah, remember, and I love going back to this, but when we talked to all the players at Media Vails in the Stanley Cup Final last year, right, they pointed to that Washington game on American Thanksgiving weekend, and kind of a similar sentiment where they just kind of stood up and said, hey, if we're going to win hockey games, we need to be way different than we are right now. And I wonder if maybe we'll look back on this Utah game as kind of that similar turning point where the Oilers just said, hey, everybody needs to be better. And I think that goes from the goaltending on out. And I think that's exactly what we saw in those last 5 periods, is that from the goaltending on out, the Oilers were 10 out of 10. And listen, I know a lot of you like to come into the chat and be like, the Oilers don't have goalies that can make big saves for them. Calvin Pickard against Utah, even though he gave up 3 goals, he gets full marks for that victory because of the 1 pad save he made in the 3rd period. That game does not go to overtime, and Ryan Nugent-Hopkins does not have a chance to win that game for the Oilers if Calvin Pickard doesn't make a 10-bell save near the end of regulation.
Totally. And I think it shows too, like, allowing 3 goals but still having a save percentage over 900 shows how well he actually probably did play. And yeah, that was a big save. And again, the guys addressed that in the post game too, just like they probably don't get as far as they did if it wasn't for Calvin Pickard, who to his credit, and there's been all this talk about other goaltenders coming in, like, I don't really know why you want to move on from this guy. We're talking about a 1A, 1B combination everyone wants. I was like, well, Calvin Pickard has been awesome. It's 2 of his last 3 starts besides the last game. The Oilers didn't score a goal in his starts, and he still played really, really well for them. So I love Calvin Pickard. I'm a big supporter of him. And yeah, I think that Utah game, like you said, like he showed up in a big moment despite allowing 3. Showed up when they needed him the most and made that save.
Yeah. Let's get into that game against the Avs a little bit more with our scoring summary brought to you by Charm Diamond Centers. You can hit them up at charmdiamondcenters.com. They are home of the Charm Masterpiece program, which can get a custom ring built and delivered to you in less than 4 weeks. Check out their large selection of Canadian lab-grown diamonds, and don't pay until the new year with their instant in-store financing, OAC. Go to charmdiamondcenters.com for more information. Again, actually, you want to go back? Let's talk about the Nuge OT winner before we get into the Colorado game, because that gave them their second straight victory. It got the vibes real high at our watch party at the DNVR bar, where we had, again, 50, 60 Oilers fans crammed in there. But there's also something, talking about improving the vibes for us at that party. Nuge scoring the OT winner is a little bit more special. Like, you know, when McDavid and Draisaitl do it and they like don't even celebrate, right? They just like take off their chin strap now and they're like, yeah, whatever. We were supposed to score that goal. Nuge scoring it and having a nice little vintage Nuge celebration. Also, just a great defensive play there to be hard on the puck. Nuge showcasing his dad strength a little bit and then firing it low blocker, as only Ryan Nugent-Hopkins knows how to do. That was a great, great moment for Nugent. Hopefully a source of confidence for him going forward, because he's one of those guys who falls into the category of not being good enough in the first quarter of the year.
Yeah, totally. He needs to take a step in his game, and 3 points over the weekend is kind of kicking it off with just a great effort, you know, like kind of just a showcase of what Ryan Nugent-Hopkins is all about, right? It has a defensive touch to like strip guys of the puck. Was it Logan Cooley who got that puck off, I think, who's
Cooley or Michelli?
It was Michelli, yeah, the Italian Finnish man. And just a great play by him, and then yeah, just like kind of a snipe. And you said too, like when you face a goalie the entire night, you kind of should be able to figure him out in overtime, and Nuge did it there. And yeah, just a guy who needs to kind of get going offensively here. Obviously, we all know what he's capable of, and hopefully this is kind of a step in the right direction.
Yeah, and shout out to Goat and the boys, our pal Rusty, Patrick Casper, getting to watch their Edmonton Oilers in first time without the. Okay, am I back? Can you hear me?
Yeah. Did you knock your mic out?
Yeah, I knocked my mic out a little bit. It keeps coming unplugged. Anyways, shout out to all the Oilers fans in Utah. That was pretty cool to see them all making their posts. I thought Goat and the boys had their cool little decals. I saw Rusty got his hands on one of their necklaces. It was sweet.
Yeah, it was good. And I think the cool part about it is like, one, that they're able to go and watch the Edmonton Oilers in their own city now and enjoy the atmosphere of what seems fantastic in Utah. They seem to have really bought into what that team can all be about. It's a very young, exciting team with a lot of potential, but on the other side, just the fact they got to see them win in an exciting game. Obviously, the power play shows up. First time all year, they've got 2 power play goals in one game, which is crazy. You get strong saves, like we said, from Calvin Pickard, and then obviously a vintage Ryan Nugent-Hopkins overtime goal. Just great play by him overall, and a big win by the Oilers too. Obviously, we said like that first period must have been pretty frustrating. I think after like, I'm sure all week they'd worked up a strategy of how they're going to come out and everything like that, and you kind of like lay an egg, and then you go into that dressing room and it's addressed immediately. And I think too, like we see it every now and then. We don't really address it, but just like people talk about like the locker room. There must be something wrong in the locker room. It's like, I honestly never think that with this team anymore. I just think it's such like a veteran group and a group of like holds themselves accountable. And obviously the games haven't been good for the most part this season. They've been good and bad, I guess. But that just to me just showed how strong this team can be when they kind of come together.
All right, let's get into the Colorado game. I think I'm back on the correct microphone now as well. But in the first period of that game, it was a little back and forth. Stu made a couple of nice stops, but it was Nikolai Kovalenko, son of former Oiler Andrei Kovalenko, finding the back of the net on the power play. Probably one that I think Stu could have had, but with the hindsight of how well he played after this in the game, for this to be really his only one mistake, I wasn't all that upset about. But it does go back. This was a question in the mailbag this week, which you can still read up at Oilersnation.com. And it was like, what do you see with Stuart Skinner when he's struggling? And his ability to move laterally is one thing I noticed when he's struggling versus when he's on. Like, he just didn't move all that smooth right there. He didn't read the play very fast. Then he got a piece of it, which again, like I feel like he could have had this one, but with the context of how well he played after, I'm not going to like hold it against him all too much.
Yeah, I have two things on this one. I think too, when it shows the other angle, he wasn't able to turn his glove quick enough. So he kind of catches the padding on his glove, but if he was able to turn it, it probably goes right into the kind of netting on it. And also too, this is a straight up interference call on the blue line that was just completely missed. If you watch, I think it's Ivan, I believe it.
It's a pick play.
Completely takes out Connor Brown from the play. We've seen the Oilers get
How many
called
times have we
one.
seen Zach Hyman get called for that, Liam?
Totally. Like, and that's exactly what I was thinking. Like, even like just slight movements from Hyman, we've seen penalties, and just across the league too. It's not just an Edmonton thing. This one is just so blatant, and I cannot believe they missed it. To be honest, Colorado should never been given the opportunity to score there, and fortunately, too, it ends the Oilers' penalty killing streak that they've been on.
Yeah, that too. PK, though, still was good, going 4 for 5 in the game. They gave the Avs 5 chances with the power play, which is not good. But they were down 1-0. The good news is they didn't stay down 1-0 for long, because Connor McDavid just had one of those vintage Connor McDavid shifts. He was all over the Avalanche for about a full 60-70 seconds, and then he slips a beautiful pass over to Kasperi Kapanen, who fires it home, his first goal as an Edmonton Oiler. And Kasperi Kapanen, that's a good first goal to have. That's a nice lesson on why you like playing for the Oilers if you're a winger like Kasperi Kapanen, because he took 2 strides and then had a nice backdoor tap in right on his tape.
Yeah, and I think credit to him as well to kind of, he didn't really move, like you said, but for some reason McKinnon also follows McDavid behind the net, and Kapanen just recognized like, oh, I have literally nobody around me here. All I need to do is get into space and McDavid will find me. And that's exactly what happened. I think he's done pretty well since he's come and joined the Oilers. Like, nothing too highlight reel by any means, but I know our guy Sean Pang put out a clip of him against Utah, a really good defensive play that he made, and then obviously getting his first goal there.
Surprisingly enough, the Oilers win this game 4-1. That was the only goal Connor McDavid got in on. In the second period, it was the team's hottest goal scorer, Vasily Podkolzin, finding the back of the net. Stecher and Brown pick up the apples here, make it goals in 3 straight for our boy Vasily Podkolzin. A great play by Troy Stecher to get that one through. Based on Stecher's celebration, I think he actually thought he scored it. He was on both knees, like pumping his fist.
Yeah, I yeah, it definitely did look like it. If you look at it too, you can see he's definitely screened himself by the guy up top when he shoots it. But just good play by Podkolzin too, and I think taking advantage of the fact that it was Casey Middlestad battling in front of him as well. Like, just left his stick just completely loose to get that tip. And now 3 goals in 3 games for Podkolzin. He mentioned after the Rangers game, it's like, yeah, I'm glad I've got one, but like, I need to keep going. Like, I can't just have 1 goal now. That's not enough. And 3-3, it's awesome to see. And hopefully this confidence just keeps riding. I don't even know what my expectations are for him. You know, like, he just plays so consistent every night. His work ethic is always there. Like, he's a 10th overall pick, but when you move on from a team, like, that kind of disappears, right? Yeah. So my expectations are for him to just be strong every night, and if he gets a goal, then it's a bonus almost.
Yeah. Isaac is in pod scoring 20 this year. I mean, listen, his pace is now better, right? He's kind of, I think he's on pace for like 10 or 11 goals on the season after this good start, maybe a little bit more than that. But again, if he finishes in the 12 to 15 goal range and you're sitting there going, we gave up a 4th round pick for him, that's great, man. That's awesome. So, yeah.
Yeah, you can't be disappointed with what he's been able to bring for you for a 4th round pick that probably, if it was ever going to help you, wasn't going to help you for like 5 or 6 years.
Yeah. So that trade's looking good as Podkolzin heats up. That gave the Oilers the lead, and they never surrendered it. In the 3rd period, 3:56 in, Brett Kulak's 5th of the season, as he now has, I mean, this is the most goals he's ever scored in a year as an Edmonton Oiler, and he's 1 goal away from matching his career high back from a few years ago with the Montreal Canadiens. So Brett Kulak is a goal-scoring machine. And listen, there were games earlier in this season that the Oilers were losing because of their goaltending and because of defensive miscues. This is one of those where it's like, hey, everything evens out in the long run, because Georgiev probably should have had it. Also, it clearly went off an Avalanche as they were scrambly as hell for the final 2 periods of this game. Like, this was, again, we talked about puck luck needing to shift for the Oilers. This is the puck luck shifting. That's what I was getting at.
Yeah, totally. And I think you look at all 3 of the goals the Oilers scored when there was a goalie in the net, is they're just around the net, getting pucks to the net, and someone's kind of getting in the way or is making its way through because you're making life difficult on Georgiev, who has been, quite frankly, terrible this season for Colorado. So just once they found their groove, didn't really seem like there was any coming back for Colorado, like you said.
Yeah. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, his second goal of the weekend, sealed it up with the empty netter, and the Oilers walked out of Colorado with a 4-1 win. And we, the Nation Vacationers, walked out of Ball Arena, got back on. So we did our pregame watch parties at the DNVR bar, which is where we're going before the football game tonight as well. And they loaded you onto like city buses from the bar and drove you to the game, but like they weren't city buses because like they had the DNVR logos on them, but they like gave everyone a beers they walked on. We had the music cranked. We were listening to Nickelback on the drive in. We were nice and fired up. And then the bus ride back, we had the ABBA going. Everyone had their beers again. It was a pretty good time. The bus rides were probably the highlight of that game from the Nation Vacation perspective.
How was Ball Arena? Like what in comparison to the 4 arenas we went to for the playoffs last year? Where would it rank?
It was like pretty cookie cutter. Like, I mean, when you come in, there's like a cool little staircase kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, it was fine. The seats upstairs, though, we were in the 300 level. They were like, if you think the upper bowl at Rogers Place is tight, take the upper bowl at Rogers Place and take like 4 inches off every seat. Like you were just like this, you're piled in together. So it was a little uncomfortable in the upper bowl, but all in all, the arena was fine. Nothing there. It's not in my favorites. I've watched an NHL game in I think 14 different spots now. It's in the back half for sure. Like it's not my favorite. But again, pretty average. It definitely wouldn't be like last or whatever.
Is it an older arena? Kind of
built in the late 90s.
Makes sense. And there it is. What a crew. And is that the bus?
Yeah, so that was like our little city bus, which is pretty cool. Like, again, we had all of our Nation Vacationers. Few people weren't in this photo. We had a couple of stragglers, just Oilers fans who happened to be down there as well. So we had a really good time playing. We obviously played La Bamba on the bus too. Saw this jersey, Keep Nuge Forever, signed by Nuge. That was a pretty sweet one. But the Oilers fans showed up in Denver. We had a really good time. Also, the fire alarm went off yesterday in our hotel. So we all had to get out of the hotel. But that's me with the fire truck. Thought that was a cool photo.
I loved your caption. It's lit up in here, or whatever you said.
Yeah, it's been lit on the Nation Vacation. We're having a good time. We're going back to the DNVR bar in like 2.5 hours. It's a 6:15 kickoff for Monday Night Football. So everyone who's on the trip with us is coming to the Monday Nighter. And the bar that we're doing like our deal with, they were like, oh yeah, we're going to leave at 3:00 to go tailgating. And I'm like, what? That's like 3 hours before the game starts. So the bus leaves at like 2:30. So you can probably imagine the shape I'm going to be in, but that's why you're hosting the show tomorrow, Liam.
Yeah, I think I'm going to chat with Coom tomorrow. It's a game day, so we'll have some stuff going on.
It is a game day. The Oilers are in Vegas tomorrow, so a big one as they'll look to continue their winning streak. Let's keep talking about that winning streak a little bit with our guy, Louie DeBrusk, Sportsnet analyst, former Oiler, joining us for his weekly appearance. Louie, you were on the road trip, the first game in Utah. What did you think of Utah?
You know, I'm sorry I missed you in Denver as well. I know you said you were coming in, but being the back-to-back game, we got there for game time, did our stuff before, and we were right back up in the press box, so we never got to really connect for morning skates or anything like that. But it looked like I saw some of the footage there. You guys having a good time in Denver, which is awesome. So enjoy the football game. You know what? I thought the game is obviously what you kind of expect after 5 days off. They took a little time to get into the game. As far as Utah itself, awesome to see hockey in a new market. I think it's always special when you go into a new environment, a new city. You have new fans for the first time. There's going to be, we showed a young fan in his first ever NHL game he had a sign, and that's kind of what it's all about. When you start to expand to these markets that don't typically have hockey, and don't get me wrong, there's been minor pro hockey in Utah for a long time. I played here back in the old international hockey days. Now it's the East Coast Hockey League, but it just really opens the eyes up when it's the best league in the world coming into your city, and good on them. The building, it reminds me a little bit of Phoenix when I played in Phoenix, the America West Arena, where there is some seats where you can't see everything, and they still sold those in that game because of Connor McDavid. So, I mean, listen, if you're going to get a discount on a seat, you understand you can't see a couple corners. I mean, literally from our press box spot, which was on the main concourse, we couldn't see the one corner. See entirely in the corner. This is what happens when you're setting up a new NHL team, and I'm sure they'll work that out and try and make that better every single year that they can. But overall, guys, honestly, I thought it was a really good experience. The fans were passionate. The game itself was one that took a little time to get going, but once they did, they found a way to win, which is the most important thing for Edmonton right now, staying in that pressure of the game and finding a way to pull out 2 points.
What has been, obviously the Oilers won 3 games in a row now. What do you think the biggest difference has been from, let's just say, like 2 or 3 weeks ago to this past weekend?
It's a good question. I always lean first and foremost on the stars of the team, Liam. You know, I think when you look at this team, when they're going and they're rolling, I mean, Connor's on a roll right now. Leon's on a roll right now. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins is starting to get rolling. I mean, this when the big guys start to come and play, Darnell Nurse back in the lineup. I mean, he was really missed. And I think we talked about that. When he's out of the lineup, you miss him. Like, he takes up a lot of space, a lot of time, minutes. It's not an easy guy to replace. And I think that it's at the stage of the season now where that Thanksgiving, that U.S. Thanksgiving is always that date where everybody in the back of their mind thinks, okay, you know, we have to make sure we're kind of in the mix here at Thanksgiving, of the U.S. Thanksgiving every year, to make sure that we have the best percentage opportunity to get into the playoffs at the end. This is a team that knows how to play well at the right times of the season, but I think there's been a switch. I think the team together and said, okay, we have to start playing the right way. And it hasn't been pretty all the time, but for me, it's the consistencies. I thought Evan Bouchard's best game against the Rangers. And you know what? Apparently he was a little bit ill before the game, and the warm up and all that. He just was like not there. He was questionable to play. But what I think that did for him is it just settled him down, and he just played really poised hockey, and that's really what he has to do. The offense. I'm too worried about the offense with Evan Bouchard. I think it's always going to come for him. He's just that talented. But when he just plays poised in the defensive game, him and Ekholm are a great pairing, and they're starting to figure it out again, right? Wasn't a great start for a lot of players. It really wasn't. But when the big guys start rolling the way they're rolling, everybody seems to follow suit. Now you're starting to get depth scoring. Podkolzin with 3 goals in a row. When you start to get that production, the Henrique line, which I think has been pretty consistent this year, they're starting to produce a little bit. To see where they can be such a dangerous lineup offensively, which we weren't really worried about, but you start to get a little concerned about that the puck wasn't going in the net. But it's defense. We talked about this all year. Stuart Skinner starting to play well again. I mean, you know what? It's funny because we're so quick to criticize him when he doesn't play well, but we don't want to praise him when he does because we just expect it. So he's played really well. He's made the big saves when he needs to, and he's starting to put a stretch together. And when he plays well, he gives his team a chance to win. Same with Cal. He's a scrapper. He gives them a chance every time he's in there, it seems.
Yeah, like in that Utah game, if Calvin Pickard doesn't make that big pad save in the third period, we might not be talking about a 3-game winning streak right now. Like, that's a big save at a big point. Even though he gave up 3 goals, he was a key contributor.
Yep. And let's face it, we talked about a lot, guys. They weren't necessarily getting those saves early in the year, right? But I don't want to just lump it on goalies. And I think, you know, for me, Chris Knobloch said it the best when obviously better than anybody, and he just says, listen, we have to be a little more predictable for our goalies. We're turning pucks over in areas where we shouldn't turn pucks over. The chances are coming from areas that the goalie has to react to it instead of just being, hey, if we take away the high danger zones and we allow the goaltenders to just kind of, you know, do what they have to do and make the save, which is what their job, and we take care of all that surrounding noise around them, then they're going to make more saves than they're not. And I think that the whole team entirely, they're still trying to figure that out. They're still working into it. But I will say this. You start to see Stetcher and Darnell Nurse. That's been a pairing. Yes, he's put Kulak over there, and Paul Coffey's not afraid to shuffle that around. He wants to get Kulak involved more. He's having a terrific year. But you start to see that chemistry start to build amongst players. It takes some time. It doesn't always just take off like wildfire. It doesn't. Sometimes it takes some time to build that chemistry. And, you know, you're starting to see that guys get a little more comfortable in their allows their partner and everybody else on the ice to understand what they're going to do. So things are coming together. It's still work in progress, though. I'm not going to say it's perfect. There was some sloppy parts to that Avalanche game where that's a team that can make you pay when you do that. But you know what? Like I said, Stuart Skinner made some big saves, and we probably didn't talk about him enough in the game about how big those saves were because he allowed them to kind of stabilize and eventually take that game over.
I have a little bit of like a bigger picture question for you, and I have a long-winded way of eventually getting there. But you know, we heard the guys talking in the media after the game against Utah, where like, you know, for for lack of a better phrase, they called each other out when they were down 2-0, and they kind of said, like, we need to shape up. And Liam and I were talking earlier in the show about last year. It was the game against Washington is the one they credit as like the moment where they kind of stood up in the room and said, we need to be better. And I think back to, you know, the first few playoff runs they went on with McDavid, the year they went to the Western Conference Final, there were, you know, adding guys like Duncan Keith and Mike Smith and being like, we need veterans, we need to insulate these guys. But now it feels like this group is kind of past the need for that big veteran presence to do it for him. Like, it feels like over the last 3 years, we've watched Connor and Leon kind of grow to a point where they're not afraid to be those guys anymore. Have you kind of watched that development too? Like, is what I'm saying making sense?
100%. I agree with you. I really do. I think that you can always add, but at the same time, I think this core, and I'll go even further to the Zach Hymans of the world, the Ryan Nugent-Hopkins of the world, Matthias Ekholm, Darnell Nurse, Stuart Skinner's now got. You're starting to build a core here that not only has had the experience necessarily actually in the playoffs, but they're learning how to be even better players and better teammates. And I think that goes a long way. I think if you look at any good team, it takes those top players sometimes a real hard loss to figure that out. That was a crushing loss in the Stanley Cup final for this group. Crushing loss. It is every single year when the team that loses in the final loses that final, because it's an amazing run to get there. And not a lot of guys get to experience Stanley Cup final. So number one, we look at it as just a whatever, we kind of brush it away because they didn't win. But they were one win away from winning the Stanley Cup. They were 2 goals away from winning it. So that's a tough pill to swallow for entire summer when you know that, you know, that was right there at your fingertips. But I think what it also does, and I think you lick your wounds, and I think you come back the next year and you start to methodically work yourself into the season. I just think it makes you have that upper echelon game. You know you can dig in and get to it. You know how to push the right buttons. And it took them a little time to get there. There's no question. Even the top guys, it took them some time to get there. I really think the injury to McDavid, though, I think Draisaitl, you know, he went into that game in Nashville, and I mean, he was outstanding in that game. He just went to a new level. And I think the responsibility, call it unfairly, whatever you want to call it, but he becomes, no question, the number 1 player on the team. And I could just tell, I bumped into him the night before the game, and you know, he was walking back with Zach Hyman, and they had gone out for dinner. And I just looked at him. I told the guys when I bumped into him, we were going to go watch a little bit of the football game and have a discussion. I said, you know, he's cruising back to the hotel. He's getting dialed for tomorrow's game. Like, he's not messing around. Like, he understands that there's a lot on the plate now. There's a lot on his shoulders, and he took his game to a new level. And I think for Connor, when he saw that and he was watching that from home, hates to be at home, doesn't miss a lot of games. But when he came back, game he didn't get a point, but after that it was look out. He has been on fire. He has not taken the foot off the gas pedal. And when those 2 guys are rolling, don't apologize for the fact you've got the 2 best players offensively in the league for the last 10 years. That has been the MO of your team, and that's what it has to be. And they have been, and then everybody else falls into suit. Yeah.
Last one I got for you. I know Liam has one more, but I wanted to talk about Kasperi Kapanen now that we have a little bit of a sample size of him, and he's got his goal now playing alongside Connor McDavid. Has he done enough for you in AB? Maybe we can flash up the Oilers DFO lines. Like, when Hyman and Arvidsson are both back, 2 guys have to come out of this lineup. Is Kapanen one of those 2, or has he earned enough to maybe stick around over someone else?
It's a good question. Listen, it was game 3, and going into the game 2 nights ago, in the back of my mind, I was saying to myself, the experiment with Kasperi Kapanen needs to start producing. Now, he rang the bar. That's the thing with him. Just like any other offensive player, he's going to be a little bit streaky at times. But when I went back and I did a lot of research on him and the goals that he scored with Toronto, the goals that he scored with Pittsburgh, goals he scored with St. Louis, and mostly Pittsburgh and Toronto, though he played with elite players. And if you watch those goals and you go through the goals and watch them, he's on the ice a lot with Matthews in Toronto, Nylander, Marner. I mean, but especially, you know, John Tavares, Kadri at the time, like, he can play players that know how to pass the puck. He knows how to get to a spot. And that goal that he scored in Denver was a prime example of it. He didn't get lost in the motion of McDavid going with guys kind of, you know, draped all over him. He just kind of snuck in back. Look how he just kind of sneaks in there. Mm-hmm. And he understands this is a really high percentage shot, the place to be. If I'm in this spot and the puck comes here, I've got a really, really good chance of putting this puck in. And he gets lost. Good goal scorers get lost. Guys that are offensive, they know how to get lost in the shuffle. best players in the league trying to defend you, but somehow they're invisible on the ice at the worst possible time. The great players in the game have done it their entire career. How do they do that? They're magicians. We're in Vegas right now, and they're like David Copperfield. They just vanish, and then all of a sudden they're there. They're there, right? So, listen, he needed to produce. I think he needed to have something happen. He's not taking that spot from Zach Hyman, but the one thing we have to remember, Zach Hyman can play left, and he was a natural left winger as a right-handed shot coming into this team. And I think that is the most important thing, is that they'll have options. And you know what? Then they have some hard decisions to make when the team's playing well and you're winning games. I mean, Derek Ryan stepped in there and won 9 of 10 faceoffs, I believe, the other night. I mean, this is, you know what I mean? Like, these guys, when you start scrapping every day to stay in the lineup, that's when you become a really good team. And as a result, when we look last year, the Brobergs and Holloways of the world didn't get in there every night because this team was fighting for that type of respect. And you had to put the best team on the ice that you felt was going to win. That's what it's going to be. And then when you start having that internal competition, I think that's the best thing you can have. So has he done enough? I think he certainly gave himself another game with that goal the other night. And he's going to have to continue to do that. But I don't think he's ever going to take Zach Hyman from that line. But he might push him over on the left for a little bit. That's always an option they can have. So I think for Chris Knoblauch, it's going to be great to have options.
Yeah, I think it's just really good to have competition internally, right? Like everyone pushing each other every day. But I actually wanted to ask you about Zach Hyman. Obviously, the Team Canada roster is getting named this week. Do you think he should be part of that team? He's such an interesting conversation. Obviously, we all saw Chris Kunitz go to the Olympics because of Crosby. And Hyman's way better player, right, with McDavid. So do you think that should be should be going?
He's on my team. Sorry, he just is. I have a different philosophy, though, than most people probably do. But I look and I think they're going to have enough upper end talent. They're not going to need more of the skilled type of talent in the top 9. Top 6 is going to be loaded. So for me, I'm going to build a team that's a team. I'm going to build guys that can work in the corners, that can rag a puck down the wall, that go to the net front and make it difficult. I think they're going to have a lot of competition from some of the other countries in the sense that they've got some big power forwards that go to the net they're going to have to defend. So for me, I look at it from a standpoint, like have been mentioned, Adam Lowry's of the world have been mentioned. These are great players for me. These are the kind of players you want to have in your team. For me, that's just me, the way I think about it. You're going to have enough skill. I'm not worried about it. I can't wait to see McKinnon and McDavid flying around the ice together. I think it's going to be fantastic. The Braden Points of the world, he's a shoo-in on my team. I love that kid. But for me, Zach Hyman, that chemistry that he has with Connor McDavid, I think you can't teach it. You can't manufacture it. He scored 70 goals in a season, in the regular season and playoffs. It hasn't been a tremendous start for Zach. I'm not worried about that. When the chips are on the table, I think he's going to be just fine.
Yeah, and that's what I find funny about a lot of these conversations around the Four Nations thing is people going, oh, he's not playing good right now. He's not playing good right now. The tournament's in February. It is 2 months away. You can't be picking up based on who's playing well right now. You have to look at a bigger sample size than that.
I think it certainly plays into it, Ty, a little bit, though, right? If a guy comes out of the been one to say you got to reward people to come into a season, especially there's so much pride to play for your country. I mean, that was never something I ever had to worry about. But let me tell you something. I think it's got to be one of the things you can be most proud of in your career. And if you talk to players and over the history of time, Stanley Cup is obviously the ultimate goal for a hockey player because that's what you're playing the game to do. That's what you're paid to do. But the Olympics, gold medals, I mean, the fact that McDavid and the young players have been kind of robbed of that opportunity to go out there and represent their countries, I think it's awesome. It's going to be extremely exciting to see it back in action again, and you're going to see motivated players. But for a player to come into this season where you have the Four Nations face-off and then you have the Olympics next year, to start putting the seasons together at this time, you got to sit and think to yourself, with all that pressure to make that team, there's motivation there, and you're seeing guys step up and have a big year. You have to look at that. I think you have to look at that and say, oh, I have a preconceived team. But there are some players that no question you can pick pre, and you know they're going to be fine. And Zach Hyman, for me, is one of them. He's just one of them for me. Now, I know we're a little biased being in the Edmonton market. I get that. But he's been shotgunned to the best player in the game for a few years now. I think he's done just fine.
Yeah, I agree. What's a day off in Vegas look like for Louie DeBrusk? You going to see a show tonight or something?
You know we are. We're gonna go see Carrot Top tonight. Jack Michael set us up. My wife's He's here with me too. So we went out and saw a show last night. Absinthe. It was pretty good. I got to tell you, it was up close and personal. If you ever want to take that one in, it's really a small venue. So, but that's the great thing about Vegas for me, anyway. I'm not a huge gambler, guys. I'm not going to go down and play the tables. I'm not going to do the slots. And if that's what you like to do, that's fine and dandy. But for me, it's about the food here. It's about the entertainment, and quite frankly, just people watching in this bright light city. So, really look forward to the shows, and we're going to Carrot Top tonight. He's been a mainstay here for 20 years in Vegas. He's got to be doing something right, so we're going to check it out.
All right, we'll get a review from you next Monday, Louie. Appreciate
right,
you popping on.
sure.
Enjoy Vegas.
Okay, guys, take care. Have a good time at the game tonight.
Yeah.
There you go, Louie DeBrusk from Vegas, where the Oilers will be in action tomorrow. And just a little tease. That's the nation vacation at the end of the year. We're taking everybody down to Vegas in April. So we'll have more details on that a little bit later on this month. Just a few little areas we got to clean up before we can make the announcement. But if you want to come to Vegas to watch the Oil in April, we might be able to hook you up. Shout out to Louie for popping on once again. Tomorrow, game day. Liam, we're giving away $50 to Sports Closet. Even though it's a road game, we're coming through for the people. So don't forget that, because you're in charge of the show tomorrow.
Okay, did you see Tyler Mulick went out and got his hat from Sports Closet over the weekend? It actually looks pretty sweet. So whoever wins that, you've got a good selection at Sports Closet to pick from.
Yeah, he picked up a nice, fresh, like white vintage hat with like an NHL 94 player on the side. It was pretty sweet. Shout out to Louie for popping on. Liam, let's get into our Sherwood Ford Giant question for the day, brought to you by Sherwood Ford the Giant and Nation Valet. Never visit the dealership again for car service. Call up Sherwood Ford the Giant, even if you didn't buy your vehicle there. If you need routine maintenance done, they can hook you up with the Nation Valet service. The Edmonton Oilers begin a new month. Liam, and our Sherwood Ford Giant question is simply, what will their record be in the month of December? So they have a pretty interesting schedule. They obviously kick it off with a big divisional matchup against Vegas. They actually play Vegas again next week as well, Saturday the 14th. So 3, 6, 9, 12, 13 games in the month, Liam. In November, they wound up going, I just closed my window. But the Oilers in the month of November went 8-4-1. So that's a pretty good pace over 13 games. But what do you got in December for a record?
I think it's fair to say, if we walk through it, they'll probably, let's just say they split the Vegas games, right? So they'll go 1 win, 2 against Columbus. I'll say they beat St. Louis. Tampa Bay, hit and miss, we'll say overtime. So I'm at 2-1-1 there. Minnesota, I think they will lose. So I'll say 2-2-1. I think they'll get a minimum of 8 wins
out of the 13. So 8-4-1 or 8-5.
Yeah, so very similar.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Utah at the end of the month, you should beat Utah. You just did it. Anaheim at the end of the month, that should be a win. Ottawa's in shambles. More on that in a second. That should be a win. San Jose should be a win. Columbus, I know they always play Edmonton like weirdly hard, but that's in Edmonton. It's a different story. That should be a win. St. Louis has been wildly inconsistent. That should be a win. Like the home games, I almost feel like, again, there's 4, 8, 10 home games in there. No, I did that way wrong. 9 home games. You should go 7-2 in your home games this month. And then the road games go 500 and boom, you're 9-4. Like that, I think 8, 9 wins is a realistic expectation for this team, and it'll give them a chance to kind of reestablish themselves at the top of the Pacific Division, or at least in that race with the Vegas Golden Knights. I mean, you do yourself, the best case scenario is obviously you beat Vegas both of those games, right? You're not going to play them again until April, but if you can get 4 points out of those 2 games and leave Vegas with a nice goose egg, you're right in the mix for that top spot in the division. Once again, I think points percentage wise, you actually would be in the top spot. So yeah, those are 2 big ones, and there's some easy spots. So I like Maddie says, big month coming up. Let's go 10-3. Chayo says 10-2-1. Optimism. Phil says, don't care as long as you beat the division rivals. And I think that's fair to Brian. 7-2-3. I just don't see the Oilers losing 3 overtime games. I think they could lose 1, but like Edmonton's a good overtime team. So there you go. That's what the month ahead looks like. Shout out to our friends at Sherwood Ford the Giant, Liam. We got a couple other things we need to get to, but on Mondays, we like to bring in our pal Anthony DeMarco from Daily Faceoff to go around the NHL. His appearance brought to you by our friends at Greta Arcade Bar Street Food. It is a great spot post-game. It is a great spot pre-game. It's a great spot for Taco Tuesday or to pick up some wings. They do it all at Greta in downtown Edmonton. Big homestand coming up in December, so you're going to want some pre- and post-game spots. Greta is number 1 on our list as we bring in Anthony DeMarco from Daily Faceoff. And we got some news over the weekend, Anthony. David Yaremchuk, the drama finally comes to an end. Columbus moves him to Minnesota for a handful of draft picks and Damon Hunt. What did you think of the return Columbus got?
I mean, they certainly went with, I guess, quantity over the quality. From what I heard is that they originally wanted maybe a similarly ranked player. They couldn't find that, and then they moved on to draft picks. Like, look, Damon Hunt at this point is just a third pairing guy, but they load up in draft picks over the course of 3 different drafts. That first round pick is probably going to be in like the mid-20s. It may well be the best piece of that entire package that they returned, or they got in the return. And from the Minnesota Wild's point of view, like, they're really building from the net out. Like, now you look at Zeev Buium with Brock Faber, you add in David Yaremchuk now, Jesper Wallstedt in net. So, I mean, for the Jackets, they have a lot of draft picks coming their way with an NHL-ready young defenseman that maybe could evolve into more than what he already is. And then for the Minnesota Wild, you're adding another significant piece to that back end that's already looking impressive, not just in the here and now, but for the future as well.
Yeah, it was an interesting trade. Obviously, the Oilers played Colorado over the weekend and got to see what Gorgiev was all about. I think he actually played probably a little bit better than people expected him to, but they also went out and acquired Scott Wedgwood. What do you kind of make of the Colorado Avalanche goaltending right now?
I mean, Scott Wedgwood is definitely an upgrade on Justus Annunen. I've liked Wedgwood for a while, but as a backup, and you see the numbers right there, they're not that much better than Alexander Georgiev. And look, this is more of a support addition for me than it is for someone to take over for Georgiev. I don't think Wedgwood has ever shown in his career that he could be a surefire starter, but this is more maybe a platoon option now for Jared Bednar and the Colorado Avalanche. Obviously, we know how much Georgiev played last year. Maybe that's a key contributor into why he has really struggled this season, including going back to the playoffs. So maybe Wedgwood is a guy who could lessen his workload. But all in all, I don't know if this really moves the needle, because at the end of the day, when playoffs come around, you expect it's going to be Alexander Georgiev, not Scott Wedgwood. And even if it is Scott Wedgwood, I don't think the difference is that consequential. So for me, it is an upgrade on what they have, but for a team with cup aspirations like the Colorado Avalanche, I don't think this move moves the needle nearly enough.
Team Canada has apparently been picked. We should hear an announcement, or we will hear an announcement in the next 48 hours here with the original roster for the Four Nations face-off. You posted out your Team Canada lineup. You had Hyman on there, but no Evan Bouchard. Take me through maybe a couple of your tougher decisions in your lineup.
Well, with Hyman, I think it's just because I'm going to go with like a 2-year sample size, if not more, of him having longstanding chemistry with Connor McDavid. And I do think if you look at the underlying numbers, he has played better than what his point totals have shown this season. And this is a very short tournament. It's 4 games each. You are going to look for instant chemistry. One of the reasons I have John Tavares there to play with Mitch Marner, in addition to him being a point per game guy, he's someone that has played left wing in the past with Mitch Marner. Is really good on faceoffs. And then you look at Hagel and Cirelli. They have familiarity, easy enough for me to say, with the coach. The top 2 pairings there play together already, Taves Makar, Theodore Pietrangelo. And the reason I leave Bouchard off is because his biggest attribute is on the power play. And I look at this team, Makar's going to be on the top unit. I would imagine Morrissey's on the second unit. So if Bouchard isn't playing a significant role on the power play, I just don't see the role for him. Now, in a vacuum, is he better than guys like Sanheim and Noah Dobson? Probably, but you can always just pick the best players available.
Yeah, I think sorry, go ahead.
Okay. Just with Bouchard, the only case I'd maybe make for him is like when you look at this blue line, there are a decent amount of, call them defense first players there, like good, true defensemen. If you wanted to bring Bouchard as a 7, like, again, that's just if your offense needs a jolt, you throw him in. Like Morrissey, you're right, though. Like a safer play, I'm really torn on it just because he's struggled this year. But I also look back to the last few playoff runs, and he's a guy who always gets better when the games get bigger. So I'm honestly really 50-50 on that. And that's a biased opinion, too, being an Oilers guy. So, again, I don't fault you at all for leaving Bouch off. I wanted to follow up quickly before you get to the next one, Liam, on the goaltending. Binnington, Hill, Talbot are your 3. An interesting balance of, like, again, looking at sample sizes versus picking a hot hand.
Well, look, it seems like Binnington and Hill for a few weeks have been like the 2 slam dunks as the 1-2 punch. I mean, this was kind of where I got to this stage of the predictions where I was just like, you know what? I'm just going to chuck whatever at the wall and hope it sticks. Like, if someone's just like, oh, I want Montembeault, or oh, I want Marc-Andre Fleury, or it should be this guy. Like, I don't think it really matters. Again, 4 games. I think Binnington will get the start. I think Hill will get a shot. Like, how likely is it that you get to the third guy? And it seems like it's a slam dunk that Binnington and Hill are the top 2. So, I mean, I just said Talbot because of recency bias, but at the end of the day, I don't think any pick is that consequential in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, I agree. I wanted to ask you about the Ottawa Senators. Obviously, Frank reported last week that Josh Norris was somebody who could be available for a trade too, and things are not going well in Ottawa, to say the least. Do you think they're kind of getting to that breaking point now?
I would imagine so, but all I've heard is that they don't want to move on from Tim Stützle. They don't want to move on from Jake Sanderson. They don't want to move on from Ray Tkachuk. They don't want to move on from Shane Pinto. They don't want to move on from Ridley Gregg. They want to move on from Josh Norris. But Josh Norris is locked and loaded with a massive injury history and a contract until 2030 with an $8 million cap hit, or just under that. And for me, I look at this team, and it's a brand new front office, a brand new owner, a brand new coaching staff. And I'm saying, how can you be so married to a core group of players that has won nothing? And like, look, you don't want to move on from Tim Stützle, fine. Sanderson, fine. Tkachuk, fine. But when you get beyond those guys and you start dubbing players like Ridley Gregg and Shane Pinto as untouchables, I just, that's where I'm like, well, how much do you really want to cut into this chemistry of your team? And, you know, I had someone tell me earlier today that last year Steve Staios was looking for a first-round pick for Jacob Bernard Docker last year. It's like, you can't be so married to all these guys that have not only not won anything, but were drafted by a prior regime. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying that it would be easy to move on from a guy like Ridley Gregg, who was playing 4th-line wing last night, or Shane Pinto. But if you really want to shake up this team, you have to cut deeper than just a guy with a really bad contract or third-pairing defenseman.
Last one I got for you in our 5 things, Anthony. The Flames and Connor Zary. He's off to a good start this year. What do you got there?
Well, it seems like obviously he's a guy that will be one of the faces of that franchise moving forward. No surprise that they want to lock him up. It sounds like the Flames would like to do a bridge deal. Like, one deal that kind of popped out to me is like the Alex Newhook 3 years, $2.9 million AAV. Now, look, it's not always a slam dunk that what the team wants to do is what the player wants to do. So just take that for what it's worth. But I think it would make sense. And maybe Zary comes in a bit higher because he has been playing center this year. Newhook has not been a center in Montreal mostly. And I think Zary has proven to be a better player than Newhook. But I think 3 years in that $3 to $4 million range is something that maybe the Flames would want to look at least in the here and now. But again, this has not been any like significant trade discussions or signing discussions, rather. I think it's just in the infancy stages of where the Flames would maybe like to go with it.
I think for a lot of teams, this isn't just a Flames thing, but like you're Calgary, you're kind of in this retooling period. You're going to have $35 million in cap space this summer. If you like Connor Zary, lock him up and sign him, because again, if the cap's going way faster than it has been the last number of years because of COVID, then sign Connor. If it takes $7.5 million to sign him, just sign him for 7 years, 7.5. And again, if you like the guy, commit to him. Going halfway, I feel like they're just going to have to pay more when they need the cap space more in a few years when they're trying to be good.
No, exactly. And they are not overly deep down the middle. Like, yeah, they have Michael Backlund, but they have Nazem Kadri, but those aren't future players. Mm-hmm. And I think there was a bit of a discussion is Zary a winger? Is he a center? But to this point, he's played top line wing. And I think he has somewhat rejuvenated Jonathan Huberdeau. And I use that term loosely. But again, top line centers nowadays, I mean, $8 million is just like the lower end top line center, right? Or even some 2Cs are getting over $7 million. So if Zary is proving to be a 1C, I'm with you, Tyler. Why not just lock him up right away?
There you go. Anthony, as always, man, appreciate your time. Everybody in the chat, you can find his work over at dailyfaceoff.com. Thanks for doing this.
Appreciate it. Take it easy, guys.
See ya.
There you go. Anthony DeMarco for our friends over at Greta. 10 more minutes left in the show, Liam. Couple things we want to hit on. First, some Oilers notes brought to you by our new friends over at the Sober Carpenter. Craft beer reimagined. This year, Sober Carpenter is celebrating 5 years of brewing award-winning non-alcoholic craft beer, from hoppy IPAs to rich Irish Reds. They've got the flavor without the buzz. You can find Sober Carpenter at Sobeys and Loblaws, or delivered straight to your door at sobercarpenter.com. Cheers to 5 years of staying true to the craft. Sober Carpenter, crafted for those who sip differently. I love this partnership because I am in on the craft non-alcoholic beers. I love it. Like, again, I'm trying to, cut down a little bit here and there where you can, but like when I'm sitting watching a hockey game, I like just the taste of a beer. That gives me a good feeling. So having a non-alcoholic beer where you don't wake up the next day with a headache or anything, that's good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, if you like that kind of stuff, I've never mixed in one of these Sober Carpenter ones, so I think we're gonna have to try it now that we're in a bit of a fling together.
Yeah. Okay, Oilers notes. Bo Akey has been invited to the Team Canada camp. This was surprising.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, Team Canada camps are always incredibly competitive, and I think he needs to do a lot to get on this roster still, but a credit to him for getting called up to the camp in general. Obviously, nice to see an Oilers prospect. They have very few get recognized for a Team Canada roster, but yeah, like Bruce said, they're in a tough spot, but nice to be recognized.
Paul Fisher, the player they got in the Dylan Holloway kind of even up trade with St. Louis after the offer sheet, whatever that was, he's going to Team USA's camp.
Yeah, which I think this might be a sneaky good piece of business from Stan Bowman. Very minimal trade at the time. I think obviously the huge disappointment of Dylan Holloway going, but this Paul Fisher, he seems to have done really well this season, and to get on this Team USA roster, it sounds like he'll actually have a pretty good chance of making the team as well. Like, strong skater, more a defensive minded player from what I've noticed with him, but it would be obviously awesome to get to see him play live on that kind of stage.
Yeah. Last one we got in our Oilers notes. Jeff Skinner fined $2,000 for embellishment. Come on, Jeff.
Figure it out.
Yeah. Okay. Let's move along. Wrap up the show with our Bet365 other sports report. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Download the app. Use the promo code NATION today. Bet365, Liam, I was all in on last night. My Buffalo Bills winning a game in the snow, covering the spread. James Cook gets a touchdown, and Josh Allen with the play that will cement him as this year's MVP, a throwing touchdown and a receiving touchdown on the same play. This is the first time a quarterback has ever recorded all three, of a throwing touchdown, a receiving touchdown, and a rushing touchdown in the same game. Allen found the end zone twice yesterday. He was magnificent. Bills win a Snow Bowl. It was a beautiful sight.
Yeah, it was a wild game. Just really, I don't know, like in the first half, those running backs were just basically on both sides were doing whatever they wanted because nobody could get any grip with their feet. But this play was cool. I don't know if this was the two only other plays to do, or the last two, but the other two were two running backs. So yeah, credit to Josh Allen, like you said, probably the MVP this year, because everyone else just seems to have had that one game that totally screwed up everything for them. But Allen has just been awesome, to put it lightly.
Yeah, he's going to win the MVP. Lock it in at Bet365. Wise Kyle says Marcus Mariota did it with Tennessee. He did that, but then he didn't get the rushing touchdown later, which is what makes Allen the first QB to do all three in one game. So giddy up tonight. Me, Bag Milk, and Jay did a 3-leg parlay of all three of our teams because we said we're all watching the games together. So we did Vikings, Bills, and Browns on the money line. So I went pretty heavy on it. So I'm sweating it out tonight as the Browns take on the Broncos.
Yeah, I think we're gonna need some birthday luck, I think, for Jay and his Browns. But I'm gonna look at a ladder play in that game for Jerry Jeudy or Cortland Sutton. I can't decide which one I'm gonna do.
I think I'm gonna do Cortland. I like Cortland.
Yeah, I'm gonna do that too.
Also, you have in here Justin Tucker, man. I mean, that was a good win for the Eagles, but like, dude, what do they do with Justin Tucker?
It reminds me of a few years ago when Green Bay had Mason Crosby, and he was terrible, and they just couldn't cut him because he's this like legacy player, and I totally get it. But the only reason the Ravens lost that game, well, not the only reason, they couldn't score touchdowns, but they made their field goals, and game's completely different. Philly can't play the way they typically want to, who were quite frankly terrible the entire game. But yeah, Justin Tucker, I don't know. I think at the end of the season, I would not be surprised if he just retires.
Yeah, I think at the end of the season, he will be told, hey, man, you're retiring. And he'll go,
Yeah.
yep, that makes sense. I'm going to go out on top. One of the best kickers of all time, but Father Time remains undefeated. Okay, one more from the CFL. The Edmonton Elks have settled on a new coach. Mark Killam is coming over from Calgary. He was with the Stamps for the last number of seasons. A bit on the younger side in terms of the CFL picture. I'm surprised they didn't end up just going with Rick Campbell, but I also give Ed Hervey and company credit for doing the forward-thinking thing and not just going with what's easy, and that would have been finding a way to bring in Campbell. So good hiring by the Elks. I like that one. Last one I got for you, Liam. And remember, you're supposed to tell me not to get excited about Juan Soto.
Oh, but you should today, because that was a crazy report.
Andy Martino out in New York added into his report. He said there's widespread belief amongst Juan Soto bidders that the Blue Jays will come in with the highest offer for him. Again, I think he is going to be a Met. I don't think the Yankees are going to pony up enough money, and I think the Yankees are trying to do something to him, being like, whoa. We're the Yankees. You should want to be a Yankee and win here. You take less money. The Mets, Steve Cohen, their owner, he doesn't give a shit. The Jays, they don't give any, like, they do not care. So I think the Juan Soto thing maybe has legs.
I hope so. I really do hope so. I think it would be so big if they were able to get him. Obviously not a big baseball guy, but I know Juan Soto is a pretty good player. So if he could become a Blue Jay, maybe I'll watch a game or two next year. Maybe 3. Oh, you're I didn't realize you're kind of lagging a little bit, so your screen was still and then you moved.
I'm back now. All right, that was a good show. Liam's gonna be handling things tomorrow. Gonna be talking maybe a little bit of World Juniors. You might have our boy Coombsy on, a couple balls up in the air there, but enjoy your show. I gotta go get ready for the football game tonight because we're tailgating for 3 hours.
I'll have fun.
I will. Shout out to Louie DeBrusk, Anthony DeMarco, AB behind the scenes. Great stuff. Everybody in the YouTube chat, you were great. Hit the like button before you go and tune in tomorrow because this show, even without me, will still go on at noon Mountain Time. Subscribe to the YouTube if you haven't already, and we'll chat with you again tomorrow. Short for Giant Game Day edition of the show starts at noon Mountain. Oil up.
Thank you for watching Oilers Nation every day. Hit the subscribe button to never miss a show. And for more, visit Oilersnation.com.